Well, well, well. It turns out that not all wounds leave a mark, or a scar if you want. Sometimes it sounds like, I love you, I need you. It feels as though you're being compelled, and it slowly destroys everything you are from the inside.
Yeah, I think we talk about some pretty heavy topics. And curiously, I think this is about among the top top thing up there. So I'm curious, looking forward how we do today. So let's confront your troubles.
And make conscious the unconscious.
Hi, this is Josh.
And this is Santi. Welcome to the session in the Mind Quest.
But the goal today was to talk a little bit about toxic relationships, what makes a relationship toxic, um, and sort of what to do around that, and maybe for a little bit of how people get into them, why people remain in them, and what it looks like from both the inside and the outside. I think we could look at all the different sort of factors that come into building, establishing, and maintaining a toxic relationship over time. And also, hopefully, the ones that come around towards ending a toxic relationship and hopefully moving on into something more healing and growth oriented. Yeah.
Yeah, so I believe today's starting point must be identifying that moment when one of the party members in this relationship seems, for some reason, to be the one dictating the choices, finances, social access, and even how we are allowed to, I don't know, express ourselves.
I think when we think about toxic relationships, the image that comes to the head is what I would call a late stage toxic relationship. Like when we are throwing plates at each other, kicking doors, meeting each other up, calling the police. I think it's important to understand that. I mean, maybe rarely it happens, but most people they're gonna go from zero to hero. Like they're gonna go from we become a couple days and tomorrow we are throwing plates and breaking down the house. There tends to be a process. There tends to be like a series of sort of turning points where boundaries get broken, where trust gets broken, where what's allowed and not allowed sort of begins to blur and break down. So it's important to see this as a process, as something that you can end up in, rather than something that you necessarily from the beginning were predestined to do. I think one of the sort of elements that we usually talk about when we talk about family violence or couples violence or toxic relationships is that there needs to be a sort of match between the victim and aggressor. And well, we'll talk about the roles as well, but there needs to be a sort of match between the two people, right? And there needs to be a sort of the right condition, and we often say in this show, like the right condition for the wrong thing to happen need to be there. For two people that with each other may be very toxic, maybe perfectly functioning in other relationships. So it's important to consider all of these elements, right? And all of these, like I said, progression from, probably normal everyday working relationship that we become a couple into okay, well, we have a problem and we are having issues. I think there are many elements that are sort of quote unquote characteristic of a toxic relationship. But again, keep in mind that as we go around talking about different elements like gaslighting, love, conditional affection, or whatever, it's not that you need to have all of them for your relationship to be toxic, right? At the same time, nobody's perfect. They're not going to be some like comparison towards the other perfect if they are not perfect. But again, like the only person who's going to be able to draw that line of okay, this is like unacceptable to me is you. However, the tricky thing is that when we are there in the relationship, it's very easy to keep moving the line back. It's very easy to keep saying, no, another chance. It was a mistake, let me move the line back. And then you get to a point where you look back and say, holy shit, like I would have never, like on my sane mind, allowed this to happen. If somebody else told me that this is happening, I would have immediately said this is insane. And somehow I am here. It's because of that. Because there is, in not a 1 to 100, it goes progressively. Some of these things may appear, some of these things may not appear. Some of these things may be there all the time, some of these things may not be there all the time. So there is a lot of complexity to exactly what the relationship looks like. So it's important to look at the dynamics, right? Some of the goals we have here, like gaslighting, for example. The underlying sort of goal of gaslighting is manipulation. So while it may be harder to like through the logic of arguments be like, okay, what's going on? It may be a way out to take a step back and say, okay, if this person trying to get me to do something. So regardless of the validity of your argument, if this person trying to get me to do something, then maybe I don't want to do. So things like that. So a lot of this will be about the relationship dynamics and the boundaries being broken, and that can look in many different ways. I don't know if this is a good
Yeah,
starting point.
I've been looking at it and remembering a lot of my own story, and there's always this issue where you find out at some point that you realize that your relationship and your feelings and your needs or maybe your experience are minimized,
Mm.
and for some weird reason, like the world is against you, and something actually is ending up pointing at you as, I don't know, discrediting what you're feeling, or maybe you're overreacting. So at the end you end up feeling like useless, really. And somehow the perpetrator, the one that is actually with the taking over the power, I mean, is being affirmed in what he's saying, what he's giving to you. So you go down in whatever you're trying to recover.
Mhm. I
I
think
mean, that's related to fear, right?
yes, I would say I think
Fear
you're pointing
practices.
out sort of the underlying mechanism, right? Because again, like most people are rational human beings that if they are in a situation they don't like, they would leave, right? So we need to see this as a different factors that sort of lead to the normal mechanisms of me being able to say, okay, this is stupid, and I just find this somebody else, not being able to come into play. So fear is one of those. Um, and it can be fear of many things, right? Like it can be like a very practical fear. Sometimes we talk about like financial abuse, where if I leave, I am not going to be able to pay for my food, or for my housing, or for my kids' clothing, or uniform, or whatever, right? So it can be that kind of fear. It can be like the fear of violence, right? Like if I do something wrong, I'm going to be hit, I'm going to be punished, I'm going to be in any way like be victim of violence. It can be a fear of social pressure, for example. This was a bit more common in like older generation. But there was a lot of these, okay, I'm not going to leave because what are they going to say? Like, I don't want to be like a divorced woman. What are the ladies at church going to say? It's kind of funny for me, but like, no, this is, for a lot of people in the present, it is still a very like compelling reason to stay in situations that they would otherwise not stay. There is also, for the following from fear and moving a little bit around it, isolation is another sort of quite important element around abuse or around like toxic relationship, right? Like something that would happen is that um, sometimes intentionally, sometimes like I said before, it's just a matter of personality, right? But the victim or the victim aggression will be slowly sort of moved away from support mechanisms. Slowly moved away from friends, from family, from if they're like a professional psychologist or psychiatrist, like maybe Ganga, like good for you, like she's telling you like bullshit, like or whatever. So there may be this isolation. Now, sort of kind of leads to this idea of fear, right? So what am I going to do? And there's nobody there to provide aid if I escape or whatever, right? Um, and again, for all of these sort of ideas, again, orbit around the same curve, right? Like manipulation, right? Like the one person in this relationship, in this particular moment in time, is trying to coerce, to compel, to force the other person to do something they otherwise would not normally do. Maybe it's staying with me. Maybe it's having relationships that you don't want to have. Maybe it is something around money, around like inheritance. Like I mean, there are so many things, right? But it is this idea of manipulation, of using all of these mechanisms to force the person to do something they would not do otherwise. Um, yeah, like forcing somebody to do something like this. You don't need to have a gun, but it can be just as heavy, just as threatening, just as difficult to pull apart from. Because in some ways it's even worse, right? We have talked about how important the social element is, for example, for us as people. Uh, Maybe living as a divorced woman in church is worse than being held at gunpoint. That's something you have to deal every day with your life. So there are a lot of these things that, again, kind of important to keep in mind. And um, the sort of underlying theme of this is manipulation. And there may be many reasons for manipulation on the other person, maybe fear, maybe narcissism, maybe aberration, maybe whatever, it doesn't matter. The point is that somebody is being manipulated into doing something they don't want to do. And that's kind of what makes it toxic in a way. I like this next.
Yeah. So I think one of our last spots today is going to be, well, yourself. If you're being a victim of this kind of relationship, well,
Mm-hmm.
at some point you choose it, but you end up turning into a victim.
Mm-hmm.
And it's what happens with your individual worth.
Mm-hmm.
So, or your preferences or your confidence and that sense of security that you're supposed to have, it's beginning to fade at some point and even disappearing in some cases. So we have to check on what's actually happening to us in matters to actually stay conscious of that something is happening out of our boundaries, out of our control mechanism, out of whatever is inside of us, and we're letting it happen due to different contexts, different situations, and we need to do something about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I think that's definitely a good way to phrase it as well. Like, there is this. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, what part of the key idea is doing something about it. It's being able to recognize that something is going on. Often that is a problem as well, and then being able to sort of realize or account for the resources that there are that could let you change the situation. Um, Sometimes the first step is to try to find those resources. Like it really depends on the details of what's going on. But a lot of the times, like you well said, the first step is realizing, okay, this is something that needs to be changed. This is something I need to do something about. Hmm? So maybe with that, we can start with today's, like for the body of today's talk.
So well, uh, I was really hit when I started checking on this because
Hmm.
it's like my life history, more or less. I've been into toxic relationships like my whole life
Hmm.
until more or less this point, but somehow I realized that something else is actually happening. So um, I'm gonna be naming some of the concepts that are linked to this kind of situation where you're actually in a toxic relationship. So you got guys gaslighting loops,
Hmm.
push and pull cycles, blame shift, isolation, scorekeeping. These are all like usually associated with a toxic relationship. Some distort reality by generating doubt. you don't know if he's telling the truth, and you are not able to connect correctly with your memory, so you can actually say, no, he's being false about it. This is not real. And so some others seek to create attachment or dependency, uh, to wash one's hands of responsibility, and blame the other one, to, I don't know, and even turn love and forgiveness into a transactional commodity. See, you pay for receiving love, or receiving forgiveness somehow, uh, with actions, or whatever. Sometimes even with money, or goods. So, what do you think if we take a closer look at these manipulation practices?
Mm-mm. Yeah. So yeah, so like I said, um, okay, I think a good way to sort of characterize one of them is by looking at sort of the cycle of aggression. So I'm gonna simplify this a little bit, but there are a few sort of typical stages, right? You have the honeymoon phase, which is, I mean, it starts really anywhere, but you have the honeymoon phase. You have the sort of when things start to break down. You have the full on challenge, like when everything goes down, players are thrown, the fight come along. You have a makeup phase where, no, I promise you, give her again. And then you have honeymoon phase again, and the cycle repeats. So I skipped a few of them there, but this is the cycle of violence. Um, and the idea is that even if we normally talk about this in terms of aggressor and victim, really both are victims of this cycle. Really both are trapped in this sort of loop. And things like these guys like the loops and these push up and pull cycles, like the blame shifting, all of these are sort of the mechanisms that make this cycle move along. So all of these things will appear in different moments to help sort of the cycle keep moving, right? So if we are in the honeymoon phase, maybe I am being more like towards scorekeeping, for example. So maybe everything is fine, we love each other, but aha, you did this, and I did it for you, you didn't do this for me, aha. Now we are starting to move on in the cycle, right? Then we are now on the full-on fight, right? Then we need to move the cycle to the next page, right? So how does it move? Okay, let me gaslight you. No, it was all your fault. It was you were the problem. You say, yeah, well, my problem, yeah. Okay, good. We're now making up. We're now in the honeymoon phase. And the cycle continues. So if you look at it as a cycle, where these actions are sort of the pushes that move along the thing in the cycle, but then you can have like this more like a systemic picture of something going on. Of it is not this moment, it is not this thing that I did. It is the whole system that is problematic. This is something that's happening over and over and over again. It doesn't matter if it's the clothes on the floor, the pet, the my coworker, the clothes I wear, I didn't clean the house, like money, like my parents, like it doesn't matter. Because it's always the same cycle. It's always the same feeling, it's always the same fear, it's always the same whatever. It's always the same gaslighting, the same blame shifting, the same isolation, the same scorekeeping. I think it's also important to see them as self-sustaining, right? If I am gaslighting you, and I can tell you something that is not real, you being able to talk to your brother or your sister or your parents is a risk for me, because they may make you realize I am bullshitting you. So isolation is part of that. Okay, so no, they are lying to you, they are bad for you, you only listen to me. So they go hand in hand. Same thing with scorekeeping. Like again, you can see this as a manipulation mechanism, right? Like if I want you to do something, I cannot pull like going out of you and force you like that. I have to sort of get you to choose to do it yourself. So I'm going to use the logic of scorekeeping. So I did this, you haven't done this, so you have to choose to do that. I'm not forcing you, you are choosing, but look at the score. This is why. But you are choosing, but look at the score. So that's, again, manipulation, right? Like this is, again, there are multiple things here if you think about it. Like this is the score is also sort of shifting blame. It is you, it's your fault. So you have to fix this. Got me, I'm perfect. You have to fix it. So again, they go hand in hand. They go, like, we separate them as academicians to talk about them. But in reality, all of these things happen next to one another, connecting one with another, with a logic that follows one another. So it's important to keep mind of all of those things as well, right? It is very likely that if you were to question somebody doing this, they would have a perfectly reasonable explanation to what they are doing. That doesn't make it toxic. It's just that they are both trapped in this victim cycle of violence. Violence is harmful for everybody involved.
Wow, I've never seen it like you are both sort of victims in a self-destructive cycle, really. But yeah, more like when you're the victim, especially you tend to realize that it's just the other one that's get you into that. But well, so I mean, we became attached to the trauma.
Hmm?
Yeah, and normally is what happens in the relationship. So and fear, loss, and loneliness, or the perception of failure are like completely normal now. It's not supposed to be, but you're normalizing that because I don't know. Sometimes you get used to this idea of love equals um, like hardship to work out. You need to effort yourself. If it's not painful, it's not real love. So these ideas tend to get attached to you, and you keep on going because you know this is valuable because it's getting hard, like work.
Mm-hmm.
So we place our hopes in beliefs and those moments of joy. I mean, that's small moments of joy, and even like they start to justify any external ties such as finances, as you mentioned at the beginning. Yeah. So or maybe children, if you get children in that kind of a relationship, or maybe stuff of status if you're having a toxic relationship with a friend in I don't know high class. You're trying to think of a status situation, or maybe it's held because you're having a shitty friend that is a medic. I don't know, and he helps you somehow, but end up being worse on the psychological part or the psychological effects of that. Anything else? I mean, anything else that could come into a relationship that's I don't know, having these external ties somehow uh, making you feel lost of your own self. And one might say it is like sort of an adaptative behavior, right? You're getting adapted to this change and this new relationship, uh, but you're under a constraint. So, well, then, and this will be like the question in here is why do we stay in these relationships? What is it that keep us there? Because I mean, most of the time, you know, it's harmful for you. You're noticing it. You're feeling bad. You're not doing anything about it, but you're feeling bad. Honestly, you see this friend is always making you feel hit and bad and down, and it's affecting your relationship, or it's your fiance, or it's your girlfriend, or whatever is around, and you're not doing nothing about it. You just stay there. Why?
But there are a few factors, and I think that's why what makes it so insidious and so common, I think. And this will have different ways for different people, right? Like one we have already talked about before, which is this idea of uncertainty. Because you don't know if the next one is going to be worse. You don't know if being alone is going to be worse. You don't know if the consequences are going to be worse. So that uncertainty for a lot of people is unbearable. And it weighs more for for a long time than the certainty of a bad time in that makes sense. One factor. The second factor is well, I also mentioned this at the beginning. This idea of there gets to be a certain compatibility. There gets to be a certain something that fits in a bad way, if that makes sense. Um, I would call that compatibility, but I wanted to make clear I mean this in a negative sense, right? Like uh, sometimes there are things that we are getting from those relationships. There are echoes or we talked a few episodes ago about the things from our childhood. There are echoes from our childhood that are sort of influencing how we see that relationship. Um, and this may be a good time to talk about this concept that appears a lot when we talk about violence in general. It's called a secondary gain. Um, so when somebody's in a situation of being a victim, whether it is from a person, accident of nature, a disease, a bad luck, I mean, in a bad situation in general, when somebody's in a situation like that, there may be a push against getting better because when you are sick or in a bad place, you have a lot of people around you saying, "Oh, poor you. Oh, do you need help? Oh, here, let me help you with this. Oh, let's do a GoFundMe. Oh, I will stay with you all day because you are well." There are situations where those sort of gains that you are getting because you are sick or whatever become an argument, let's say, or become a factor that actually make the person not want to get better. Because if I get better, I lose all of this. If I get better, I don't see my family anymore because they go back to where they live instead of staying here with me. If I get better, I no longer have to go to my group in the community center. So I lose that circle of friends. If I get better, I am going to have to get a job and actually like behave like an adult. Like, okay, there may be this is what's called a secondary gain. And some other factor. There are like I said before as well, like the practical and I would say just like real life factors. Like if you are financially dependent on the other person, you are not going to be able to just stand up and leave, right? Like, so there is also those factors of um how real the option of actually living is. Not everybody will have a family member that they can stay with. Not everybody will have the money to take a bus or a plane. Not everybody will have the money to rent a hotel and stay there for a while. Not everybody will have the money or the mind space to start hunting for apartments and you rent. And you are doing this while you are fighting with your husband, while your mother-in-law is kicking you out of the house, while your child is threatening to sue you. Like, like there is a lot of again that's actually a lot because moving out is a lot. It is a really big task. So the barriers for the systemic barriers are another factor that limit a lot of people. Kind of connected to what I said before about what self and secondary gain, there's also this idea of sort of internal personal factors. I gave the example earlier of maybe a more traditional person may say, I don't want to be a divorced man, I don't want to be a divorced woman. Somebody may say, well, I'm staying for the children. I don't want my children not to have to grow without a father. That's not a good idea. They're actually doing more damage. But, at that moment, for that person, that may be the reason, right? That may make sense at that moment. The reason may be I grew up in a heavy shit religious church, and I was convinced that if a relationship doesn't work, what you have to do is put more work until it works. Right? Like there may be other reasons that are also there. Like it's usually a combination of all of these, right? Like nobody is just because of one of these. Um, we talked about yeah. I think that kind of covered the most common reasons why people will remain in a relationship. Usually because the cost of living is too high, cost in the general sense. because there are internal factors that are holding them back, like I said before, beliefs, fears, whatever. And obviously because there may be a secondary gain that I'm getting for this, right? I mean, maybe yeah, my husband hates me, but I'm leaving a mansion. I don't want to leave the mansion.
Tolerate whatever comes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, well, I would like to note some visible symptoms as response to this situation. So, I noted this hypervigilance, heightened anxiety or depression, depending on the factors, I suppose,
Mm-hmm.
reduced confidence and difficulty making decisions. Well, like you're getting dumb somehow. And I do remember this actually happened to me because I do remember it.
Mm-hmm.
There's somatic symptoms such as fatigue or constant headaches and so on, because there are different ways to get a somatic symptom. I used to get a lot of stomach sickness when I was into this kind of situation. Reduced cognitive capacity and the feeling of walking on eggshells. Like if you move anywhere, everything is going to shit. So or it's gonna broke or break or nah. As if anything could cause everything to fall apart. That's the feeling. You move, something breaks. So and of course there is also high tolerance for boundaries violations. Like, you don't care anymore what your boundaries are. You're just tolerating they come over from time to time because there's a chance to reconnect. I think that's why it happened because at least on my experience that was the main reason for me to let it happen. Uh, so I think it's very easy to fall into this, and at the same time to become the executor of these dynamics, even unconsciously. I mean, you're not consciously all the time. There will be people that do it consciously, but sometimes I think you can fall into acting like this without knowing why, just doing it as an impulse or a response to something without the actual intention to harm your partner or your friend or whoever is next to you. Uh, what I want to ask you in this is, what should we do to avoid being victims or perpetrators of the behavioral and psychological impact of a toxic relationship?
Okay, so I think maybe this is a good time to retake what I said earlier about for the personal vulnerability. A lot of the time, the reason relationships get so toxic is because they amplify sort of the issues we already had before getting into it. So I if I have a very low self-esteem, right? I may find somebody who agrees with me and says, yeah, you have very low self-esteem. Yeah, you suck at everything you do. Yeah. Why?
Yeah,
Because that's more comfortable for me. I don't have to question my beliefs. But now I just want somebody who is effectively toxic with me, who is confirming that I am suck at everything. So notice how nobody in this little example was malicious. Nobody went out of their way to say, oh, I'm gonna fuck up this person. It just happened that a vulnerable person found somebody who exploited a vulnerability for whatever reason. A lot of the times, we see these things in toxic relationships. That maybe from the outside, we can see that, But how did she go with somebody who is like such a flirt with everybody if she knows she is so jealous? Right? From the outside, very easy to think. From the inside, harder to realize. Oh, obviously, yeah, of course. Well, why did I go with somebody who is such a flirt? Oh, because that way I am confirming my belief that all men are cheaters. But there is something else here going on, right? But this is kind of the idea here. Like, in many ways, the secret is to get to know yourself and work on yourself. Because it's not that, I mean, it's not that it's your fault. It is more that you are vulnerable. We're all vulnerable to different people, to different situations, to different things. And that's kind of the idea here. Like, except in very specific cases where somebody's out there to hurt you, most of the time, what happens is that bad aspects of you clicked with the bad aspects of the other person. So a good way to sort of prevent that or to sort of anticipate that is to work with yourself. To sort of begin that exploration of, okay, what do I bring to a relationship that is positive, that is growth oriented? And what do I bring to a relationship that maybe is annoying for myself, it's annoying for the other person, it actually hurts the relationship? And what are things that I need to be careful with? Right? Like, what am I vulnerable for? Right? If I know I get isolated very easily, maybe somebody who prefers isolation, who prefers being just us two all the time, not the best person for me. Because I am going to end up isolated from everybody. And that is a vulnerable situation. Even if this person is great and nothing really happens, I am in a situation of vulnerability. But just because nothing happens doesn't mean the situation is you are not in a vulnerable situation. So that's kind of the idea there, for example. So, but to do that, you need to have a honest assessment of yourself and being able to say, yeah, I know that something that happens to me is that I am really, really jealous. I don't like it when my partner like even talks to anybody of the opposite gender, right? So maybe don't look for somebody who is naturally a flirt and is going to be flirting with everybody they meet. Even if they are not going to cheat on you, there is already that sort of toxic fit there. There's already that click there of a destructive match, let's say, if that makes sense. But again, the only way you can take care of that is by knowing yourself. So that is kind of the recommendation: is try to work on yourself, try to learn yourself, try to sort of be aware of your strengths and be aware of your vulnerabilities when it comes to a relationship, and try to sort of be mindful that as you are building new relationships, you are not being exploited, especially. That those vulnerabilities are not being exploited. That would be the idea.
Well, really important. I think this thing of actually connecting with yourself is
Yes.
something we always left behind.
Yes.
Most of the time, yeah, and I say it for myself, but I've seen it with my partners or friends or with my girlfriend. Leaving us behind is one of the most common things we do.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So, but if you're already there, I mean, already inside a toxic relationship, and you just notice by seeing at this that something's not actually going on as it's supposed to be, or maybe you notice that some of your bad shits are actually clicking with it, some other one's bad shits. Escaping a toxic relationship seems to be something complex.
Mhm.
The conflict escalates when boundaries are challenged. It means sometimes could be a few times a week, sometimes could be all the time. Uh, so the relation, I think the emotional stuff, social or economic, the relationship in between uh, turns into an issue all the time. You start to get that internalized guilt that appears from time to time, or if it's not always there. I mean, you're always feeling guilty for something that you don't know if you even do it, but guilt is there.
Mhm.
And at the social level, there is often this belief. I mean, what is happening to you might sound exaggerated all the
Mm,
time to
mm,
others. So
mm,
you talk to this to your parents, for example, and they say, "Nah, nah, you've always been a little exaggerated with everything that happens around." You know, or you talk to this with your best friend and say, "No, no, you're exaggerating. It can't be like that." I don't know.
mm.
You're perceived as an exaggerated person. How do we get out of a toxic relationship without harming ourselves, or at least with the less harm possible?
Mhm, mhm, mhm. No, so I think you are starting in a good step. Like it's going to be hard. Like it is going to be like a painful process. Like I don't want to like to any of your viewers. Like it is not easy, right? There is a reason why you are there right now. If you are at least are right now. I think one of the first steps is, I mean, after you've decided, okay, I need to do something. One of the first steps is sort of taking inventory of the resources that are available to you. I say this because if you had everything you need already, you may have already left. So I'm assuming that you may need help. So I think that's the first step. Make an assessment of what resources, what institutions, what whatever can give and can provide help for me in this sense. A few options. Generally, if you call the police, and I'm on emergency line, and say, hey, I'm in a situation like this. I think I need help. I'm afraid that if I do something, they are going to kill themselves. They are going to kill me. They are going to kill my family. They are going to kill my son. They are going to do something crazy. Can you help? That is usually the most universally common step. Most places will have a police, and most polices will have a procedure to deal with calls like this. They may be able to point you to the right direction. Another option, again, another resource you may have is there may be organizations, either charities or governmental organizations or private foundations that provide services to people in situations of violence or situations of toxic relationships or situations of abuse that are looking to get out. Um, there are some that are on gender, like unisex, you can just call regardless of gender. There will be others that are specialized either for men or for women. Um, I mean, people that are there to help you. So if they are open to, if you can reach out, do so. I promise you, they are going to help you to the best of their ability. Um, and that's another option. Sometimes you may be able to get support through the health system as well, depending on where you live. So not in the US, but in Canada, yeah, like Ecuador, for example, you can go to the public healthcare system, to your family doctor, to the social medicine, and say, hey, I am in a situation like this. I am feeling terrible. Things are not right. Can you help me? What they will do is usually they will connect you with a social worker, and they will sort of help you with the process. They will tell you, okay, tell me what's going on, what can we do, what can we not do, like, and they will help you sort of start moving forward. So the help system, that's another resource you may have. Obviously, local resources, family, friends, just tell them what's going on, be honest, don't ask for their opinion, tell them what's going on, and tell them you need help. And ideally tell them how to help if you have an idea, but if not, ask them to help. So local, so you may have some local social resources. Something that's a little bit more specialized than I would usually say is like in the next step is legal help. Again, depending on where you live, there may be either pro bono or a student lawyers or like again foundations, NGOs, charities that provide legal services to people in a situation of abuse or whatever or violence or whatever. You can also reach out to them. If that's not exactly what you need, they may be able to refer you to the right agency, the right person. So that's step number one. Making assessment of the resources you actually have. This usually opens a lot of doors because most people don't realize all of this is a possibility. Most people don't realize all the points of access that they may be able to have to receive support. And a lot of people, and we were talking earlier about this idea of gaslighting and isolation. A lot of people may be gaslit and isolated into believing there's no help available when there is in fact help available. So that's the first step. And step. Second step is sort of executing on the resources that you found. So if you realize that you have a family member who's willing to host you if you leave your current living situation, then prepare to take that action. See what you need, and is it just a matter of taking an Uber, or do you have to take a flight, or can they come pick you up? Like, start sort of planning, like in more tangible, realistic terms. What do I do? Maybe it's not that severe. I only need to have like a conversation with this person and say, hey, it's over. You're a fucking asshole. I am out, and then I go moving with my family. There may be middle points, right? Maybe I think it's not that bad. It's just we're just having trouble. Let's go to family counseling or to couples therapy, right? Like maybe there is that space that we can repair things, right? But again, there needs to be an assessment, right? Am I really repairing things, or am I just being the victim for like more time? Like there needs to be that realistic assessment, right? Um, yeah, I mean, somebody who beats you, somebody who cheats for you, probably it's not about fixing things. It's about stopping the pattern of violence, right? So that's again, that's an assessment that needs to be made, like based on every situation. And then obviously afterwards, obviously you execute on whatever you decided to do, and afterward there needs to be a period of sort of reflection or of sort of introspection, of sort of being able to hand over your heart, say, okay, so how much of that was me, and how much of that was the other person? How much of that could I have realistically done different, and how much of that was just unluck, was just that's life. And kind of in the sense of what I said earlier, because through that learning, then you prevent it from happening again, and that's the point. So by learning about yourself, by taking that experience as a lesson of, oh, okay, maybe I cannot be with somebody who's so dominant because I am really, if I really easily go into a whatever you say state. So I need somebody who is less assertive, who is more like, I don't know, tactic, whatever. Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe I'm too assertive. Maybe I fucked up because I was the only one making decisions. I need somebody who also has a strong personality and can stand up for me and say no. And this is like example, right? That's the idea. So that's why this last step is important. So you break, you get help, you break the situation, you are better now. Now you have to reflect, learn, grow. Otherwise, what's going to happen is your next relationship is going to be exactly the same because you didn't learn it. Hmm?
Yeah, I think that was where I was going with the next and final point of this part is once the nightmare is over, because the nightmare sometimes,
Hmm.
if we have managed to escape, so on and move on, we
Hmm.
should probably enter this phase of recovery or reorienting ourselves. I mean, I imagine at least we need to rebuild something, right?
Hmm.
There-
Hmm.
because a lot of things end up getting broken, if not physical stuff, at least something inside you is a little broke.
Hmm.
So, what in which, start this rebuilding process of ourselves, or maybe you realize that you actually need to change some stuff, straightens your boundaries or your personality, or actually getting also in that part where you process the loss because it's a loss after all, and eventually being able to, I don't know, trust again and reconnect. uh,
Hmm.
how is this viable?
Hmm.
What should we take into account in order to, I mean, overcome the bitter experience that this relationship was, to actually get out there again and start a new one?
Hmm. Yeah, so I think kind of correcting into what I said earlier. Like I think The first element is that element of learning. And again, I think there needs to be a balance here. I think sometimes there is a tendency to blame ourselves for everything. So no, this is everything. All the things I did wrong. No, they just cheat. That's everything they did wrong. Yeah, right. There needs to be like an honest assessment of, okay, yeah, sure, I'm not perfect. Maybe I did something wrong, but yeah, the other person also did things wrong. But the other person also sort of joined you in this toxic time. So I think there needs to be that balance of not blaming everything on ourselves, and then for the yeah, I'd say choose what to rebuild. Right, like if everything is now in pieces, might as well just have a little bit more thought of, okay, what am I going to rebuild? What is important for me? What do I realize are core elements of what I am or what I want to be? And what are things that maybe I don't care about? Maybe there are things that I learned about myself in this process that I might as well use as useful opportunities. Um, Sometimes this question of, was having an idea of what would I like the next relationship, whether it's a friendship, it's a romantic relationship, whatever, what would I like that to look like? I mean, a question that I like asking is if you had a magic wand and you could create a magic relationship right now, ideally the way you would like, what would that relationship look like? Right? Like why would you like that in particular and not something else? So I think that kind of questions can help you sort of form these, or rather rebuild this self-perception and this self-vision of what you want and what you're looking for in other people like yourself. Um, Something with starting boundaries and with sort of the idea or identity. Again, there needs to be a balance, right? Like it's important not to err on the side of, okay, because I got hurt by one person, all people are dangerous and horrible, and I have to stay away from them. Again, that's another sort of problematic position. Then you will find somebody who matches with that toxic side of you, and you will be in the same situation. So again, it's important to sort of have that assessment of, yeah, part of it was my fault, part of it was the other person, part of it is just that human relationship implies some vulnerability, and that's something we cannot really get rid of. So there's always going to be that gamble of, I may get hurt. So in many ways, it's about having the resources as a person to tolerate that, okay, I got hurt, without sort of, how do you say this, unraveling into a crisis, right? And getting to that point. Um, that would be kind of the idea.
Well, okay. I think it's time for us to find out these FAQs on what actually people is thinking on these toxic relationships, because you hear a lot of stuff on social media and popular media too, in, I don't know, cinema and TV series, and you can find out a lot of toxic relationships, but the experience is a completely different thing. Saying it is one, living it is another. So the first question here says, can a relationship be toxic without being abusive?
So I think you could definitely define a toxic relationship in a way that doesn't require abuse. But I think that would be disingenuous. I mean, that would defeat the purpose to sort of take such a core element. I think the whole point, or of what makes a relationship toxic, is that somebody is doing something they don't want to do, or somebody is being hurt. To me, that's baseline abuse. I'm sure we could use like wordplay to say that is not, but that would be disingenuous for me. So I would say no. I would say a toxic relationship by definition is abusive. By definition, is damaging on the people who are part of that relationship.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you may think that only physical violence is abuse, but it is
Exactly.
not.
Exactly. So I could definitely like with wordplay to make this, but I think it would be difficult. It would be like, alright.
Yeah. Well, especially in the cases of males,
Mm.
especially, yeah, a lot of the abuse does not come from physical violence, but
Mm-mm.
actually verbal violence.
Yeah,
So
I actually have I had this example earlier. We were talking about like the two people being trapped in the cycle. I remember this couple I worked with in the Ecuador actually in the Centro de Salud. I remember I was working. I mean, these guys were here ordered by the judge because I don't know. I mean, something had happened. There was some criminal activity. They had been ordered by the judge to go to couples counseling. So they were here with me. So I'd be like, okay, so what's the problem? And then at first it was like, oh no, like she punched me, she hit me, okay. So okay, so tell me the story. What happened? But we found that yeah, in fact she did punch her. After she had been outside his apartment for 3 hours at 2 a.m., banging on the door, yelling at him for whatever. I think that she was jealous of him going out with somebody. We're like, oh, okay. So it's not that he just like punch you out of nowhere. Like, this is also a form of violence. You are keeping his neighbors awake. You are keeping him awake. You are banging out his house. You are yelling outside his door. This is violence. Even if his body is not being physically damaged, this is violence. So that's kind of the idea. There is more, like, being hit by something is only a little bit of what constitutes violence. And that's what often surprises a lot of people. Like, what do you mean that him yelling at me? Yeah, it does. What do you mean that him telling me not to go out and not giving me money to go out is also violent? Yeah, that,
yeah,
yeah,
it's a Me Too scenario
yeah,
for most of
yeah,
us.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah.
So, do toxic people know they are toxic?
That's another question. Okay, I would say there is a problem with the premise of that question. Because that question implies that there is a kind of person that is toxic and that is always going to be toxic no matter what. Or yeah, I think that's a flawed premise. I think that's an incorrect way of thinking about it. Because of what I said earlier, we can all be toxic with the quote unquote right person, with the quote unquote right relationship. It is not about who I am as a person, it is about that click between my worst qualities and the worst qualities of the other person. Um, so I'd say most people are not aware that they are going to be toxic to this or that person. Because you couldn't know. Like, how are you going to know that, oh, you like to be, I don't know, fucking, you are used to being yelled at because that's what your family used to do, so you don't mind, and you find somebody who loves yelling at people and being violent verbally. That's, like, it is about the match. It is about the connection. You would have been perfectly fine with somebody else. They would have been perfectly fine with somebody else. It was this much that made you toxic. So I'd say inside a relationship, most people will be aware that the relationship has problems. How much of those problems depend on them, that is harder to be aware. So I think that's the best where I could give you this regard. Like, I would say probably not because it doesn't work like that. I would say people usually know there is something wrong. They can usually tell how much of that is me and how much of that is the other person.
Okay, this one for me is a no way. Dig a hole, leave it there, and leave. But you're the expert. So, can a toxic relationship become healthy?
I would say 99.9% of the time, no. There may be like a rare exception, like under some very specific circumstances where things can be fixed. Sure. 99% of the time, either it's impossible or it just would take so much effort that it is just a pipe dream. Like it's not realistic to think that would happen. And the reason is what I said earlier, that this is like a click, that it is like all the wrong things going right. So it is going to be very difficult to go against that tendency. I don't know if I'm making sense with you. Like I said earlier, for example, that maybe you're. I give the example of maybe you're somebody who needs a bit of a pushover, and if somebody tells you to do something, you do it, and the other person happens to be somebody who is very assertive and you like commanding people, and that this starts becoming a problem, and it starts harming you both. Because these are sort of natural tendencies of you two, natural sort of personality traits of you two. To sort of break this pattern and reorganize it in a different way that is healthy would take so much effort that it's not realistic to think that will happen. Like that would imply we are like fundamentally changing the way you look at the world and making you less of a pushover, and changing the other way the person looks at the world and making them less assertive. Like that is a gargantuan task that realistically most people are just not going to do. So can it happen? Maybe. Is it realistic to expect for it to happen? No. Odds are it will not happen. Odds are it will be more damaging, more toxic, more harmful for you to try than it would be to put a stop and move away.
So it is as it is. No girl, you can't fix him. No boy, you can't save her. So
No.
move
No,
on.
no, no.
Yeah.
And that, I always say that, people do change with time, but they don't change voluntarily. They don't change because you want them to change. So I think it's very important to, like, if there are things you don't like about the other person right now, you better be sure that you can live with those things. Because they may change. Odds are they will not. So that's kind of it.
Yeah. Next, why does it feel harder to leave than to stay?
Because it is. Because living is a gargantuan task. You have to figure out where you're going, you have to figure out what you're going to do, you have to figure out the practical element. How I'm going to feed myself. If I have children, how am I going to feed the children? You have to accept the fact of, all this thing that I've been building for like years or months or whatever, it failed. It's over. I'm leaving. I have to face that as well. So there is a lot of these physical and psychological tasks that need to be done. And choosing to do all of that mountain of tasks versus doing one more week after you have endured like 40 weeks, one more week doesn't sound so bad compared to the mountain of tasks. So that's unfortunately why things usually don't change until they hit rock bottom. Until things are so bad that really one more week really is worse than that pile of things I would have to do if I live. Ideally, it shouldn't get to that. Ideally, don't get to rock bottom before you change things. Unfortunately, it's very common. Things don't change until you hit rock bottom.
Yeah. We like it hard.
Yes.
So, this last one, I mean, sort of answered already by now in many aspects, but I think it means more like when you got two victims and two perpetrators at the same time. So, is it toxic if both people contribute?
But this is an interesting question because I think there is like I think there's like another thing that we should say. So, okay. So let's begin with the premise, right? It is toxic if you are being forced to do or handle a situation you don't want to be or forced to do something you don't want to do. And it is toxic because there is this match between, these bad bad match. So in a way, sort of the toxicity of the relationship depends on both people. So both have to be toxic in some way. Both have to be the right way for this toxic relationship to happen, or in the right condition or in the right situation. So in a way, yeah, like that's why we talk about toxic relationships rather than toxic people, or like we were saying earlier, toxic like me. It's more like a toxic relationship because it's the configuration itself that is toxic. But there can be traits that would be toxic in one relationship but wouldn't in another. So that's what I kind of think would be interesting to talk about with this question. What happens if, have example I've been used, right? I'm a pushover, like if somebody tells me to do something or I'm wrong, I just accept it as failure. What if I have find somebody who is very assertive, but they genuinely care about me? They genuinely are concerned over my well-being. And they are not asking me to do things I don't want to do. But you happen to be very assertive. And they just tell me what to do. And I just happen to want to do those things, and those things are good for me. Is that toxic? I don't know. I don't know. Right? Like I couldn't answer the question. Right? Like because you are not suffering, but the traits are just as toxic as they were in other relationships. If the things the other person is asking in this specific example change, it could become toxic. But should you sacrifice your happiness right now for the possibility of it maybe becoming toxic in the future? I don't know. And that's what I think is interesting about this idea of like if relationship toxic if both people rather than contribute, let's say if both people are okay with it. I would say by definition then no. Because the whole point of a toxic relationship is that one or more of the members are not happy, are not okay, are being harmed by what's going on. But if that harm is not happening, if they are okay, if they are growing, are those traits toxic? I would say no. I would say that depends on the couple. I think that's up to them to figure out. But yeah, so I would say yes, because by definition, a toxic relationship involves both people. But that doesn't mean that those people independently in different relationships would also be toxic.
So, a little bit like a master apprentice relationship.
It is, yeah. Yeah. There
Sort
is
of,
not
yeah.
direct connection. Yeah.
So, well, this is the closing section. So, I must say that first, thank you all for being here. Thank you, Josh, for clarifications on this matter. I mean, now you've heard so far, you got a maybe a clearer idea if you are or not, or if you've been or not in a toxic relationship, if you've been the perpetrator or maybe the victim, or both. And maybe you should keep on going with those attitudes or I don't know, parts of your personality that are taking you to these complex situations sometimes. As every week I told you, we love to hear from you on the other side of the screen. Please make sure to contact us if anything comes to mind. It will be fine to know. Josh,
No, as always, thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for spending the morning with us. I hope that you learned something, that something here was useful. Yeah, and as always, we hope to see you next week as well.
so if love and love or any other relationship demands that you disappear in order to have peace, it is not that relationship is falling or failing. It is consuming you and erasing you from reality. Seek help to try to escape.
Yeah. I think seeking help is the number one recommendation. Right there, regardless of where you are or what situation is, there's usually people, institutions, organizations around you that can help you and provide the support you need. You're not the first one. You're not the last one. There's people there to help you. Yeah.
So, until next time, peace out.
Anyways, peace. Take
Bye.
care.